Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, well, we've got something really specific we want to tackle.
Yeah, we're focusing in.
Exactly. We're taking this one definitive statement from the source material we looked at, and we're not just looking at what it says, but, how it says it.
The intent behind the words.
Right. It boils down to these 8 specific words, pretty loaded words, actually, that frame a whole cultural moment. The arrival of Beatlemania and the transformation of youth culture.
Yeah. That phrase, it really acts like a historical thesis statement, doesn't it? It's not just casually observing something.
No, not at all.
It's making a strong claim, a claim about cause and effect, really, regarding one of the, biggest cultural shifts of the 20th century.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really dig into the vocabulary the author chose here.
Exactly. Why use the word arrival? It's specific.
Yeah.
And why transformation? That's a big word, too. And what does linking them so directly tell us about how the source wants us to see this whole thing?
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. The structure seems pretty clear on the surface. Event A leads to outcome B. Simple cause and effect.
Seems simple.
But we need to look closer at the elements. The sheer force implied in Beatlemania, the definite timing suggested by arrival, and then the huge scope of change captured in transformation.
Let's dive into that first part then.
Yeah, let's jump straight into the arrival of Beatlemania. Now notice, the source didn't say, Beatlemania slowly got popular or Beatlemania's rise. It chose arrival. That word, it suggests something dramatic, right? A defined moment of entry. So thinking about the early 60s, what was going on that made a single arrival, maybe like the Beatles landing in New York, that famous footage, feel like such a huge, almost catastrophic, immediate force?
Well, what's fascinating, I think, is that using arrival like that, it positions Beatlemania almost like a cultural tsunami, Yeah. Hitting a shore that was maybe ready for something, but perhaps not.
Yeah,
not that.
Unprepared.
It signals a really dramatic break from what came before. And to really grasp why that word arrival feels so potent, you kind of have to look at the media landscape back then, the gatekeepers.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Before the mid-60s, especially in the US, culture felt much more controlled, more centralized. You had, 3 main TV networks? Music often had to go through these established channels, right?
So when the source talks about the arrival, it's sort of implying that Beatlemania didn't need to, politely knock and wait. It just bypassed or maybe just overwhelmed those old gatekeepers.
I think that's exactly what it implies.
An arrival sounds like what happens when suddenly this huge group of young people, maybe connecting in new ways, just sort of declare their own thing. They force the establishment to look.
Precisely. The language suggests the old way of doing things, that the previous cultural order wasn't just, nudged aside. It was fundamentally disrupted, maybe even broken by this new force.
So not a gradual shift.
No, the source frames it as an event. Amplified by new media, maybe, and definitely hitting a youth group that was, growing, had some money, and was ready to kind of claim its own cultural space.
That immediate impact, the arrival itself, is key to the story the source is telling here.
It's central to the historical argument, yeah.
Okay, so that's the arrival. Now let's pivot to the second part, the result of that arrival. The transformation of youth culture. Again, the word choice feels really important. Transformation.
It's not just change or influence.
Right. It's not just, musical taste shifted a bit. It's transformation.
And we connect that to the bigger picture. Choosing transformation is, it's a massive claim.
Yeah.
Think about it. A trend changes your clothes, maybe your hairstyle.
Sure.
But a transformation, that changes the underlying structure, the skeleton, so to speak. So the word itself forces us to look beyond just the surface stuff, the style, the music, the hair, and ask, okay, where did the fundamental shifts happen?
What actually changed deep down?
Yeah. Did something change in how young people related to the economy? Or maybe the power dynamic between generations?
That's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? Because if it was a true transformation, like the source claims, that implies really deep systemic change.
Absolutely.
Were young people suddenly seen differently, as a real consumer group with their own power, their own money to spend?
Yeah.
Or did Beatlemania give a voice to something already brewing, like a countercultural feeling, something challenging parents or the government?
I think the source is absolutely asserting that. It's saying the very self-identity of that whole post-war youth generation went through a kind of metamorphosis.
Wow, metamorphosis, strong word.
It is. Before, maybe youth culture was often seen just in relation to adult culture, like kids were just practicing to be grown-ups.
Like the junior version.
Yeah. But transformation suggests that this youth audience became its own thing, a sovereign entity almost, setting its own rules, its own values, maybe even its own global connections,
All sparked, or at least catalyzed, by this shared, intense experience of Beatlemania.
That's the claim.
Yeah.
The change went deep into attitudes, into how a generation saw itself.
Okay, so that really reframes things. We've got the source saying, sudden event, the arrival, caused this deep fundamental shift, the transformation, in a whole generation's identity and power, which brings us naturally to the connection between them. The source puts Beatlemania forward as the clear, maybe even the sole catalyst for that transformation.
Well, look at the structure. The grammar itself implies that direct causal link. A happened, and that resulted in B.
Right. Beatlemania arrived,
Yeah.
and youth culture transformed.
It puts Beatlemania in the driver's seat. It wasn't just part of the changing culture. According to this text, it drove the change. It suggests a certain necessity, almost.
Like it had to happen this way.
The language leans that way. It frames Beatlemania as more than just a hugely popular band. It frames it as an active agent of social change, sociological force.
Okay, but hold on a second. I feel like we have to push back on that a little, or at least question that inherent claim from the source.
Yes. Critical perspective is key.
Because, think about the mid-60s. There was so much else going on, right? Huge things. Political tensions escalating, the civil rights movement hitting a peak, economic changes, TV becoming absolutely dominant.
True. A very volatile period.
So isn't it a bit simplistic, maybe, to just point to Beatlemania as the engine of transformation?
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of ignoring all these other massive social and political earthquakes happening at the exact same time?
That's a completely valid and, frankly, essential question to ask. Could the transformation have happened anyway? Maybe just differently without them?
Yeah. Or was Beatlemania just riding a wave that was already building?
Possibly. However, if we stick strictly to interpreting the source's argument based on its deliberate language,
Okay, focusing just on what this text is claiming.
then it forces us to see the cultural element, Beatlemania, as the thing that maybe focused or accelerated all those other forces for young people.
How so?
Well, maybe the politics and social issues provided the backdrop, the sort of the raw material for change. But perhaps the mania itself, that intense, shared, global, almost ecstatic reaction, provided the unifying energy.
Ah, okay. Like the spark that lit the fire.
Or maybe the vehicle, the specific shared experience that took all these abstract societal shifts and translated them into something concrete and visible as youth culture, something they could all participate in together.
So the source isn't necessarily ignoring the other factors, but it's arguing that the transformation into a cohesive youth culture needed that specific galvanizing cultural lightning rod.
That seems to be the argument embedded in the phrasing, yes.
And because Beatlemania was so intense, so global, the mania part, the Beatles were maybe uniquely positioned to be that lightning rod.
That's what the source implies. The text draws a very clean, very powerful line of cause and effect. It elevates the Beatles from just being incredibly popular musicians to being, well, almost a historical necessity for this specific transformation.
It kind of removes the ambiguity, doesn't it? It says this is what drove it.
Exactly. It points directly. That profound transformation of youth culture. It was a direct result of the singular force of that arrival. It gives the whole phenomenon a huge historical weight, almost tectonic, as you said.
Wow. Okay, so let's put those 8 words back together for you, the listener. The arrival of Beatlemania and the transformation of youth culture. What this deep dive suggests is that the source material uses these words very deliberately. It positions Beatlemania not just as music, but as this extraordinary, singular cultural force, powerful enough to basically remake an entire generation's culture and to do it almost instantly upon its definitive arrival.
We spent this time not just defining the words themselves, but really trying to feel the immense analytical weight the author put on them.
Yeah, the significance.
And that very demanding vocabulary arrival and transformation, it really compels us to view this whole event not just as, a fun moment in pop history.
Right, not just songs and haircuts.
But as a genuine historical turning point. A moment where maybe a new kind of generational identity was forged, and according to the source, forged rapidly and fundamentally by this one cultural phenomenon.
So here's something to think about, building on that. Considering how profoundly the source describes this transformation like a complete generational overhaul triggered by an arrival,
Yeah.
what other modern cultural arrivals could you point to, thinking about music, maybe film or technology now? What forces do you think have genuinely transformed, not just influenced, but transformed youth culture in a similarly deep way?
That's a great question. What events or phenomena today feel like they have that same kind of power to truly remake how a generation sees itself?